meeting to order. Open forum registration is here and there's no names on it. Can I get a motion for confirmation of the agenda, please? Barb and Jason, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Any declaration of pecuniary interest you can declare now or at any time through the meeting. Seeing none now. Delegations, be it resolved, Council received the RQ Burnside and Associates delegation as information. Barb will move that. Jim? Okay. So I think we're all set. Yeah, you'd like to come on up and... Yeah.
Wonderful. No Raptors game on today anyway.
No, that's about average for us, so taking a minute to get...
Beautiful. I'm not sure if this...
Yeah.
Are they on now?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I do have a paper point presentation for you. I'm a little bit old school, and it's only 4 sheets, and I won't take too long.
Well, they're big sheets, though.
Yes, sir. I think there's 4 and 4. Yeah, it's very, very similar to the staff report that Jim had prepared. Thank you, Worship. And again, this is very similar to the staff report that's following up from Jim, but I'm just going to go through and give Council a bit of a Coles Nolan's version of the project. And this project was a result of a petition for drainage work submitted by 2 property owners, or 2 owners. The Matthews property, Grant, Keith, and Robert, on the north side of Southgate Road 22, and Loretta and Elmer Martin, who own Lot 10 on the south side of Road 22. Both these property owners are looking to do some tile drainage, and the requested petition was basically to get an outlet for them. The two parts to the Martin property, the main part on the west side of the barn, and the other part that we want to draw this way on the east side of the barn is shown. And what our report provides for is a small open drain starting at a creek in the Everley property, coming up across the property line, going east on the property line, and then a tile drain up the hill and across High Road 22. Doug Everley has...
I'm just wondering if somebody could use one of the pointers, or maybe Jim can follow along. If you're talking about, oh, it's not on the TV. I guess it wouldn't work on the TV, would it? I have a pointer in my pen. It's a little blue. I'm just like one of those light things that you can follow along when you're saying the creek and
Sure, can do.
the outlet. And thank you. Pardon me?
Jim says he's been bringing his along, and now tonight he doesn't bring it.
Normally you have it.
And I normally sometimes do too. But the only problem with that particular drawing is there's no barn on it or anything like that. So
The road goes down side there. So.
And there's scissors there too. That's not good.
So I think we're talking north,
yes.
west, east,
Yeah.
Highway 6, 22.
Yeah.
We went past this property last Friday.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
There we go. There we go. It won't show up there. It's on the TV.
Okay.
Oh, well.
Okay.
That's much clearer.
Imagine if you know.
On the left-hand side is Highway 6 going north and south,
Mhm.
and that's where we'll start from. Mr. Everley, he had some concerns about the tiling by neighbors. So basically, we want to crowd the highway as much as we can in order to minimize the intrusion into Doug's property, and that's what we're trying to do. The only problem we had back in February, we had an information meeting with the property owners and everybody involved. The Ministry of Transportation was there, and We normally set the top of bank for a drain 3 feet off the fence line, just so that they could put a fence up in the future. And Jim will confirm, the Mr. Representative said that they control within 45 meters, and there's a possibility the drain would have to go 45 meters into Doug's field. And I said, I don't think so, but it's not going to fly. We had several follow-up, call them discussions, and we ended up with an offset of 10 feet back from the fence. So Doug just gave out an extra. Okay, what's now? I don't think we need an announcement. Anyway, we arrived at something that will work. So I think everybody should be okay. Over to the second page.
Other one, Jim, other buttons. That works.
It was up.
No, that was a flashlight. Oh.
Let's move, we're in.
There you go.
There we go. There we go. On to the second page, which is, doesn't have any maps, thank goodness. The work itself is broken down into 3 components. The open work in Doug's place on that short little section at the bottom of Elmer and Loretta's property. That's to dig the drain, haul and get rid of that dirt in the low area in the corner, seed the banks and whatnot. The closed work, that's the pipe coming up across from the corner up across the field to the road. And then there's the road crossing itself with the catch basin on the upstream side. So those 3 components make up the construction of the drain. The work on the road, the section in the Drainage Act that says that Jim can undertake that work on his own. So if he feels it's cheaper to do it by himself, that's certainly his prerogative to do so. The allowance to the property owners, when you do work under the Drainage Act, there's certain damage allowance and land use allowances granted to the owners. They ultimately pay for it as to the roads, but someone who's directly affected by the work, they're allowed land use or compensation damage. So basically, we buy that open drain in Doug's place, the land taken, plus an allowance for any damage for equipment, that type of thing. The next 3 items are the overhead component, the report, meetings and procedure, including tonight's procedure, tendering and construction inspection. We'll hopefully get a tender and get the work done this fall. We will have someone on site to make sure that the tiles in at the proper grade, location, and depth. We'll also assist the roads with the work on the road lines. Administration and financing, that's part of the cost of the work as well. Some of the HST is not refundable. There's some interest charges. Total cost of the work is about $65,000. It's not a large job, but it's the same as every other drain, no matter if it's 500 feet or 5,000 feet, we still have to have a series of these. The cost distribution on the far side, and this is where that $65,000 has to be recapitulated or generated back from the watershed area. The first item that you pull out is the road crossing. Under Section 26 of the Drainage Act, that stays with the municipality. So there's construction and engineering for the road crossing. Southgate Road 22, it's a property owner just like everybody else. There's benefit and outlet, and they have a contribution. You take the 2 off, you take the 2 roads costs off, leaving a balance of about $41,000 to be distributed to the lands within the water area. So it's about 2/3 to the lands and about 1/3 to the road. And probably the reason it's so high is because the road crossing takes up such a big chunk of that cost as well. So the assessment for private lands is about $41,000 or $42,000. Anybody that's agricultural gets a 1/3 grant. So the grant is $13,686, which is applied for by the municipality when it's all said and done. The allowances are credited back to the property owners. So for people that were damaged, they get credit. At the end of the day, what Joanne will be sending out bills for is about $21,500. And if we can bring up that map again that has the red on it, which is the 3rd sheet, this indicates the assessments, the net assessments to the owners after the work is all said and done. And if I can, hopefully this will work this time. This here is the road component for Side Road 22, the Benton Outlet, and the special assessment. These costs here, $7,500 for the Matthews property and about $16,000 for the Martin property. Those are the out-of-pocket expenses after the job is all said and done. Doug Everley at the bottom, he gets a small refund because there's no assessment to his property, but he does get allowances for the land that's taken for the drain and for the damage during construction. From the February meeting, this went up $375 because of the additional fact that we have to give him. I tried to find Doug about 3 times, I left several messages. He's just a quiet gentleman to indicate that this is what we came up with the MTO, but I couldn't track him down. But Sid Vanity now works for us, and he basically says the MTO can control that 45-year corridor, so there's no sense of butting heads with them. And if we can negotiate it back to 10 feet, that's a win as far as I see. So hopefully Doug sees it the same way. And lastly, we have had, I don't know if we can bring that up to as well, the last sheet. Sort of preliminary timetable. Preliminary timetables on that one, there it is there. What we normally do when we bring these forward to council or to the clerk is set a preliminary timetable. We're at number 1 right now, just to review the report with council, set the date for consideration. Hopefully Joanne has time to mail this tomorrow. The first meeting that we're going to have is July 3rd, and it's called the consideration of the report. Basically, the property owners who petitioned for the drain have the opportunity to remove their name. And I don't think that's going to happen. They'll confirm that they'll stay on the petition. A bylaw is given first and second reading, and the quarter revision date is set. The quarter revision would be held in August. That only deals with assessment appeals. If someone thinks they're assessed too high, they can appeal to the quarter revision. The quarter revision will be made up of 3 or 5 members of council. And typically I've seen in some situations where they might meet 15 minutes before the regular council convenes or whatever, but that's something I'll talk to Joanne as we move forward. Hopefully there's no issues and we can get the tenders out to close in the middle of August. And still, even as of today's date, we're looking at a September 4th award of the tender and bylaw for the work. So the year is sliding by fairly quickly, and I know these fellows really want to get that tile installed, especially in a year like this. But I'm here today just to outline the process to council and answer any questions you may have. Jim's report is very similar in nature as well.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from council? On the road tour, we did stop by there and have a good look at him explain a lot of what was going on. One of the things we did notice was it kind of seemed like with the drop in the land on the one property there, it seemed like kind of a funny place to want to put a drain down instead of just normal tile drain or something. But that's what they want. That's what it is.
Yeah, we made the shortest we could
Yep.
practically. So, thank you.
Yeah, so, thanks, Brian. No? Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
I'll sit.
Yep. So we have the resolution, be it resolved, we receive the R.J. Burnside and Associates delegation as information. Any further questions, comments? All in favor? That is carried. And then we might as well do the next resolution, which is on Jim's report on the same issue. Be it resolved, council receives staff report PW 2019-048 for information, and that the engineer's report dated May 10, 2019 be hereby received, and that the date and time for the consideration of the report be set for July 3rd, 2019 at 9 a.m., and that staff be directed to circulate the report to the affected owners and agencies pursuant to Section 41 of the Drainage Act, prepared by Law 2. Ran out of words.
Implement the work and notice setting the
Oh,
date
yeah.
on the quarter revision.
Okay, yep. So, to implement the work and a notice setting of the date and time for the quarter revision. Do I have a member for that? Brian and Jim, any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. All done.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Yep. Okay. Be it resolved, the council receives a BDO LLP presentation as information, and that council approve the Township of Southgate, where'd it go? 2018 audited financial statements as presented. Do I have a mover? Jim and Brian? Hi, Tracy.
I'm ready.
Yeah, we're all set.
Well, there are quite a bit more than 4 pages, but I promise I won't read every one of them.
We'll be here.
Well, I'd like to thank council for having me here this evening, so congratulations to the new and the returning members of council. So for those who don't know me, I'm Tracy Smith. I'm a partner in the Owen Sound office at BDO. I've been a partner for 11 years, and I've been auditing for over 30, so please don't do the math on that. We'll leave that one for your accountant. I've also brought, Robin is my manager, and she's usually here to do the presentation with me. But she had a baby, so I have brought Jacob Perry with me. He's the senior in charge of the audit, and so he's a new CA to BDO. He joined us last year, and a local boy who's come home, and hopefully we will be seeing him a lot more. So I'd like to thank Liam and John, Dave, and all the municipal staff that helped us during the audit. Our responsibility as your auditor is to communicate with those charged with governance. So this report that you have in front of you contains all the required communications. I'm just going to do a brief summary of what's in the report. The financial statements are draft. They do require council approval before we can release the finals. So I'll do a high-level overview of those financial statements also. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask throughout the presentation. On page 2 of the report in the summary, the status of the audit. So once the financial statements are approved by council, then we still need to obtain a representation letter up to the date of the approval and do some subsequent events review up until that date. So materiality, amounts or materials, they would affect the decisions of users that are relying on the financial statements. The materiality that was used was $200,000. So as the auditor, we provide reasonable but not absolute assurance over the financial statements because we can't audit 100% of the transactions. So we use that materiality to help us focus the audit and help us determine sample sizes based on statistical sampling. Audit risk, our audit strategy and procedures were outlined in our planning report. So there were no changes to our plan procedures. And no additional risks were identified during the audit. There were some misstatements that we found during the audit testing, and I'll talk about those in a little bit when we talk about the unadjusted differences. So on the next page, under independence, we have to confirm we are independent on an annual basis. And so for unadjusted differences, so we're required to report to council if we find anything in the financial statements that could have been adjusted that haven't been adjusted. So oftentimes there are like late invoices that come in that it's not feasible to go back and change the whole audit process. The differences totaled $19,969, and they are detailed in Appendix C. They're not material, so we can still issue a clean opinion that the audit financial statements are not materially misstated. So we can still issue our opinion. The major difference on the unadjusted differences was an estimate for extrapolation. So as I said, when we do our testing, we only test a sample. So there were a few errors that we found with the development charges, and so then we had to extrapolate that over an estimate over the whole of the development charges. So the actual error that we found is much lower than what's on the actual unadjusted differences summary. So, but again, it's not material, so we can issue another report that everything is not materially misstated. Management representation, so a sample of the management representation letters in Appendix D. Auditing standards also require us to have an annual discussion about the responsibilities for preventing and detecting fraud. So we're required to highlight that is a shared responsibility between the auditor, management, and council. We are not aware of any issues that need to be discussed. Page 4 for audit findings. We're required to have a discussion about significant accounting practices, estimates, and financial statement disclosures. So significant accounting policies are disclosed in the financial statements. Significant financial statement disclosures would include accumulated surplus note, that's note 9. So this is the only place you would find if you have an operating surplus or a deficit. You had budgeted though to take $116,000 out of your tax stabilization reserve in your budgeted amount, so that there would be no surplus or deficit. And in line with that, once the actual results came in, there was actually $160,000 taken out of the tax stabilization reserve to make sure that the actual results were balanced to zero, so there's no amount to be carried forward into the next year's budget. Contingencies and litigation procedures are disclosed in Note 19, and commitments are disclosed in Note 18. On page 5, significant estimates would be involved in the calculation of solid waste landfill closure liabilities, post-employment benefit liabilities, taxation revenue estimates, and the liabilities for contaminated sites. Management is not aware of any contaminated sites, so there is no liability recorded in these financial statements. So under page 6, internal control matters, so we're required to report to you in writing if we identify anything during our testing, any errors in our testing. So as I've discussed, we did find a few small errors in the invoicing for the development charges. So your municipality was in a bit of transition year there last year with the joint services building, whatever they rolled, your joint board. So you're with them for half of the year, and then you're transitioning into developing your own, establishing your own building department in the later half of the year. So there were some errors that arose during those time periods in both beginning and the middle, or beginning and the end. So we would just make sure that we recommend that as you're now establishing that department, that you look at the policies and procedures to make sure that everything gets invoiced and processed correctly. So that's the required communications. Are there any questions before we do a high-level look at the financial statement? Okay. All right, so we're moving on to Appendix A. So these are the draft financial statements. So management is responsible for preparing these financial statements. So as your auditor, it's my responsibility to provide opinion on whether these financial statements are prepared in accordance with accounting standards. You'll note that there is a new format to the financial statements, that it's the auditor's report on page 2. It is much longer, but it's the same opinion. You still do have a clean opinion. The accounting standards change, so every entity that has an auditor's report, they all change. So it's nothing to worry about, that it's still a clean opinion. So when you look at the auditor's report on page 2, the major differences are the opinion paragraph comes first, so they've just changed the order of the auditor's report. An audit is the highest level of assurance that we can provide to you. And about the middle of the page, you'll see our opinion. So in our opinion, these financial statements present fairly the position of the municipality in accordance with public sector accounting standards. So clean opinion, no issues to report. The other major difference is the expanded definitions of the responsibilities of management. So they're provided in more detail. The actual responsibilities have not changed. It's just now reported in the actual audit report, where in prior years you would have all that detail in a separate engagement report. So now it's just more paper for you to read. So that covers the format of the audit report. I'm going to go into the balance sheet, page 5, the consolidated statement of financial position. So this is often called the balance sheet. It's at a point in time, so it was at December 31st, 2018. On December 31st, 2018, the municipality had financial assets of $11.2 million. So that's largely made up of your cash and temporary investments. There was a increase in your cash and temporary investments. They totaled 6.7 million between the two of them, and there was an increase of $3.4 million. So the reason for the increase in cash and the temporary investments is because that you put some almost $1 million into reserves. So as you put money into reserve, that increases your cash. And also because of the obligatory reserve fund, so these are your development charge reserve funds. There you collected an additional $1.4 million in the reserve fund there, and that money wasn't spent. So those increases increased your cash and your temporary investments. You also collected some of your taxes receivable and the trade and other receivables, so that went down over the prior year. So as those amounts go down, as you collect that money, then it increases your cash. So there was another $750,000 that you collected and now moved into your cash and your temporary investment. On December 31st, you had liabilities totaling $1.2 million. There's an increase in your liabilities of $1.2 million, and this is probably the only time I'm going to tell you that a liability increase is a good thing. Your liabilities increased because of those the development charges that you collected. The development charges show as deferred revenue in your liability section because it's not actually your money until it's spent. So instead of showing as equity, it shows as a liability. So your increase in liabilities is actually a good thing. That brings us down to the net financial assets. So this is your assets/liabilities. So again, this is a very important financial indicator on the health of your municipality. A positive number means that you have resources to move forward. You have resources for future goods and services and to invest in TCA. You do have a small amount of external debt, but you don't have debt overall, so your net financial assets are positive. The net financial assets are positive when you are building your reserves and when you're paying down debt. So that's what makes the increase in your net financial assets. So again, positive is always being that you're in a good financial position. The tangible capital assets are $46.6 million, so that's your physical infrastructure, your buildings, your land. It is reported at cost. That's amortization. So again, that's not the fair market value. So if I had to go out and replace everything, it would be much more than $46.6 million. The accumulated surplus is $51 million, and that's both your monetary and your physical assets. Moving on to page 6 is your transactions for the year. So the consolidated statement of operations and accumulated surplus. The revenues for the year totaled $10.4 million. The revenues include all the external revenues for both operating and capital. It does not include any transfers that you budgeted to bring money from the reserves. The budgeted actual amount of 10.4 was fairly close to the 10.5 that you had budgeted. Now that's a little bit deceiving because you had budgeted for $1 million in revenue for the industrial park, for selling lots at the industrial park, which didn't happen, but then you did have some offsetting additional revenues that came in. Your fees and user charges were up because you were collecting more you're collecting more building permits to go with the development charges. You also had some increases in your sewer and water revenues. In the other revenue, that's where you had budgeted for the $1 million for the industrial park. That didn't happen, but you did have some sales of the old town and a couple other properties. So that money is in there. You also had $321,000 for insurance proceeds for the Packer? Collection truck. The collection truck. So that money had come in, but you hadn't spent the money yet to replace that truck. So you did have some extra revenue coming in there to offset million that you had budgeted for. In the expenses include operating expenses and amortization of the capital assets. So that doesn't include the actual purchase of capital assets in your expenses. Overall, the expenses were pretty close to what you had budgeted for. We had budgeted 9.3 and the actual came in at 9.2. There were some increases and some decreases compared to budget within the departments, but overall it was fairly close to the budget. Annual surplus. So the annual surplus is the revenues less the expenses, and again, it's important to note that this is not your operating surplus, so you don't have $1.1 million that you found that you can use for next year. The operating surplus, that focuses on your short-term planning. So you have a tax stabilization reserve to help you with that short-term fluctuations in your operating expenses. The annual surplus is focusing on your long-term planning. So the annual surplus, you always want that number to be positive, and you want it to be a fairly large positive number, because from that annual surplus, you then have to purchase your capital assets and you have to pay down your debt. So if that number wasn't positive, then you're not planning for the future, and you're not being able to put money in reserve to take out when you need to buy those capital assets. So we take that annual surplus number on the next page. So we take the annual surplus of the $1.1 million, and then we adjust for amortization, which was the estimate of the use of the capital assets, and then we take off the amount that we add back the amount that you actually used to purchase capital assets. So that brings us down to the increase or decrease in net financial assets, so of $1.4 million. So again, this is an important financial statement indicator. It can be positive or it can be negative. Neither one is good or bad. It just depends on where you are within your budgeting cycle, on whether you're taking money out of reserves or whether you're putting money into reserves. So what you want to look at from a council, from an overview, from a governance point of view, is how well you did compared to budget. So the actual budget was a negative $3.2 million. So that negative $3.2 million actually was because you had budgeted to spend a significant amount of money for the well and to finance that from with debt. So that didn't happen. So that's why when you look at the actual numbers, your actual numbers are positive 1.4 because you didn't spend that capital, and you didn't have to get the debt yet for to pay for that capital. So in terms of how well you did compare to budget, then you're actually in a positive position. One thing to note, so you'll note that the acquisition of tangible capital assets, the budget amount was 6.2. The actual is 1.6. So there was a fairly significant difference in the amount that was budgeted. So again, you had some significant capital projects in addition to the well that had not proceeded. So that doesn't affect your operating surplus because most of that was being budgeted from either debt or to be taken from reserves. And then on page 8, so this is the last major statement in the financial statement. So this looks at what happens with your physical cash. So about in the middle of the page, you have a subtotal there of $4.8 million. So that's the actual cash that came in. The $1.2 million was spent on capital purchases, and then $218,000 was paid down to pay down some of the debt. So again, there was an increase in cash of 3.4, which again was largely from contributing to your reserves and also the development charges. So overall, the municipality is in good financial health. You did have to use $44,000 more than you had budgeted from your tax stabilization reserve. But you do still have money in your tax stabilization reserve. You still do have a significant amount of reserves that can be used in the future. Your net financial assets were positive, $4.1 million, so that's indicating a strong, healthy financial position. So I think that's all.
Wow.
So again, that's a very high-level overview, but if there's any questions, I can...
Sounds like we did good.
Had a little bit of deficit, but overall, you're in good health.
Good, yeah. Any questions or comments from council? Wow. Don't see any.
No, I haven't.
Okay, Martin does.
The tangible capital mass, there seems to be, there seems to be quite a range, 10 to 70 years, 10 to 50 years, how is that figured out? How is that figured out?
The amortization?
Yeah.
So again, it's a very loose estimate. There is guidance that's provided by the ministry, but every municipality is a little bit different. If it was really far out with the amortization, what you would see on your financial statements is big swings and gains or losses when you were disposing of the assets. So you don't see that. It's really when the ministry brought in the requirement to put tangible capital assets on the balance sheet, it was something really new to the public sector, and it was really meant to identify what assets that you had and to get you thinking about planning and long-term planning over 5 to 10 years. So the financial statements aren't the best place to be able to monitor that. You really do need to look at that outside of the financial statement process in a separate budgeting process over time to make sure that you do have enough funds to replace the assets when you need, because they're significant at times. Like I said, you got to build the reserves because you can't pay for something big all at once and try to raise taxes all in 1 year to purchase it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone? Not seeing any. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Greatly appreciated. So, there's no further questions. The motion what was read before, we receive this for information and we approve the 2018 audited financial statements. All in favor? That's carried. There you go.
Thank you.
Okay, can I have a mover and seconder for be it resolved, council approve the minutes of the June 5th, 2019 council and closed session meetings as presented, and that council approve the minutes of the June 7th, 2019 special council and closed session meeting as presented. Do I have a mover for that? Jason, and seconder, Brian, any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. Okay. Be it resolved, council receives staff report, CBO, it disappeared again, it'll come back, 2019-003 for information, and the council approved the proposed noise bylaw exemption request received from Team Town Hall for June 30th, 2019, Artemisia Street, beside the old Town Hall building, and that in the event of rain, the noise bylaw exemption request be approved for the Park Pavilion on June 30th, 2019. Do I have a mover for that? Martin and Michael, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Good comment, Beth. Okay, we'll move on to Jim's stuff. Be it resolved, council receives staff report, PW 2019-004, 2019-049 for information, and that council approved the closure of the street closure request from Team Town Hall, and that council consider approving the ATEL Main Street Dundalk Agreement by Municipal Bylaw 2019-095. Mover? Barb? Seconder? Barb? Anything you want to add to that, Jim?
Good evening, good people. The street closure request, it ties into the bylaw there, so, that's, we can, work with having that, available for them. The, loaders, we, put them on gov deals and received, about 10,000 more after all the transactions and everything, and what the trade-in values were. So, I think that was a good service there. We put out a request for information on wastewater with Triton, for some, tie-in environmental assessment for, the wastewater treatment, options. There's no prices attached to that, it's just, do you think your technology will hit these targets for the dates, and times and, that are structured in that report, so. And the other thing is, the Main Street project with ATEL participating, is kind of messy with all the partners in it, and the request was that could the township pay the ATEL portion to keep that side of things, and we would just recoup through, ATEL, so that's why we bring in this agreement to, tie in some security with it, that, if something goes wrong, then, we can go.
Thank you. How are they looking for start on Main Street in general?
As far as I know, the temporary water main is being constructed right now. That'll take about a week after, it's ready to go to get commissioned into place for service. The plan is to start on the west side, do some of the spot improvements. Our guys with valve exercising last week sprung a leak on the top of one of the valves, so that replacement was done by our crew, today. So there's one spot where they have to go down. We have a frozen water service that we know happens at the water main. They're going to put in a bigger service to that property line and insulate it on the way back up. Hopefully that'll mitigate that. And then there's spot curb repairs that are the county's portion of responsibility to be finished there. Then they're going to shade and pave the west side and then start working the downtown core. So we're starting to snowball here shortly.
Great, thank you. Brian?
Jim, I'm curious to know about the styrofoam baler over in Hanover. I see the cost was it $20,000 for the machine?
Yeah.
What sort of capacity or volume do we need to make that a sustainable proposition?
Well, I guess the history of that is Brockton and Hanover had a deal. They had a place for styrofoam to go. I guess Bruce Power produces a lot of that type of stuff with the lamps they get, so that's why they were a big partner with them. But that they lost their market for where to take that, and so now it's come back, and they purchased this machine. It's actually, I have some pictures here I can share with you if you want to look at them, but it's actually, there's bigger machines. This is a little bit of a slower version on how the process can be done. The next version up is 60,000, but it's impressive, but it looks like it's a little slow for the work that's got to be done.
But the bricks, if I might, Mr. Mayor, the bricks that come out of the machine, they're still being landfilled, right?
No.
Well, they don't have a market for it.
They're going into back into plastic resins.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting at is there a potential to put a machine at this side of the county?
Well, I guess
In partnership with another municipality possibly, or whatever. I don't know how much stuff we get at the landfill of this material, so, whether it's feasible or not, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe if there's more industry, like as as I say, Bruce Power is contributing a lot because of their process,
Right.
so. Actually, I inquired whether we'd be able to get with their program, but, they've actually been stockpiling the material, and they're actually putting message out to their, members in the municipality, the residents, don't bring it all at once, because we got lots right now, that would get us caught up and then start bringing it,
Right.
but, I have some pictures I'd share with you later if you wish
Okay,
to see
thanks.
that. It's interesting, but
Yeah.
it's something we could look towards, but, again, I
Well,
think there's
then,
some other areas too to look at
All
first.
right, thanks.
Yeah, that sounds good. We did have a bit of a talk, Sue Patterson, and they told us some stuff at county about that, and that stuff is being used for, like the plastic railings and things for filler in it and different things like that, so there is a use for it. Any other questions or comments from council on this? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved, the council received staff's report PW 2019-050 for information, and the council approved the updated policy number 56, the energy management policy and plan, and the council approved the energy management policy Schedule A and Schedule B annual report documents for 2017. Doug Moore, seconder, Martin, and Michael. Anything you want to highlight on that, Jim?
We added some new stuff into this, report this year, knowing that, we've done a lot of, improvements in a lot of areas. Some of that's starting to slow down for us. And also, we are considering with, the expansion and growth of, a new well facility, that our targets are gonna be going out of reach as opposed to getting more reachable, because we'll be using more energy as the base reports, over that time. So, again, we've, reduced our, target from 1.5 annually to 1%, to be trying to be realistic about it. And, we've tried to match our capital plan to the energy policy to ensure that we're committing to that policy.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved, council received staff report PW 2019-051 for information, and the council approved the land lease agreement for civic address 225579 for the 2019 farmland lease to Sear Acres Limited by bylaw 2019-101, and the council award the woodpile sale to Theo Olden as approved by council resolution 2019-200 on April 3rd, 2019. Do I have a mover for that? Barbara and Jason, anything you need to add to that? Yep.
Yeah, so just, we had to play a little catch up on this one. It got missed that, in the resolution to include it, because it was lumped in with the equipment, rentals and some of the other, tenders that were in that report. And it was mentioned in the concluding comment, but it never got, worked up in the council resolution. So, there was a request for, farm business registration number from Agricorp, from last year's rental, and, that's when we noticed that we were behind on this, so we brought the agreement forward. And also the wood sale, again, council heard about it, but it wasn't official with the resolutions.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Jim. Next, be it resolved, council receives staff report. CAO 2019-069 is information, and the council approved staff to proceed to explore delegations with Ministry of Health partnering with Southeast Grey Community Health Center regarding Dundalk CHC clinic funding, Ministry of Transportation partnering with Grey County related to the transit project funding, and Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks for discussion on MCA Part 2 order related to Highway 10 bypass project delays during the AMO conference. Do I have a mover for that? Brian and Michael? Anything you want to add to those, Dave?
Yeah, so, as you can see, 21 days between the time we receive and the time we have to put this together and get council's blessing, so this is council's one shot at it. If you have any other ideas, that would be awesome to get that input. I guess what I'm gonna say is, I'm not gonna promise that we're gonna take on all these, because I wanna talk to Al Madden regarding the Southeast Great piece on Friday when I'll see him. I want to talk to Kim Wingrove about because I think we need to partner with the county if we're going to go talk about that. We had a meeting with Spark today about transit, and there's a lot of issues going on there. And the one I definitely want to go for is take a run at MOE, I don't call them, but Municipal Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks regarding this nonsense delay. I mean, they're trying to take the delays out of development, and yet they still have the Part 2 order thing that somebody can just do a frivolous complaint about an EA, and they delayed it, and it's not uncommon for these things to go on a year. So I think we need to bring this to their attention, and if they really want to do something, they need to speed up a bit.
I think that falls right in with their process of trying to cut the red tape and things like that, so maybe, Brian?
Dave, I know generally the MPP of the area, Bill Walker, would accompany us in any of those meetings. Have we had any discussion with Mr. Walker regarding this particular issue?
No, other than we did put it on a list for discussions as to cut red tape. That was approved. And nobody cued into saying, hey, what's going on?
Well, I just wonder, like, maybe we should schedule a meeting either up in his office or get him down here and in front of us and say, you know, could you lean on the minister of whatever you want to call it,
Right,
please? Something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Barbara?
Since Mr. Walker is coming down this month to meet with the Egremont Federation of Agriculture, maybe if he could arrive earlier or rather than making, I mean, his time is difficult to schedule anyway, but he might have a date on his radar anyway, so.
Now that he's a mentor, it's really hard to get a hold of.
I know,
And
so
the
if
best
he's already
I,
committed to coming
yeah.
down, then that
The
might be a good day.
the best I get is kind of a response from his assistant. And the other issue was, I sent an email, and John, I copied him on it. There was an event up in Owen Sound about transit, and here Southgate is as part of this transit thing. And we were even on their radar as invitation. I did get a response direct from Bill that he apologized for that, but anyway, yeah, I'll contact them. I still think we need to take a run at the ministry, and they need to be aware of their errors, I think, in their ways in this issue. Again, is there any concerns with the other two? Do you think we should proceed if there's participation at the other levels?
Okay. Absolutely. Martin?
Did it, the transit project funding, is that because they took that year off to make it harder for everybody? Or
Well, it's
or is
that,
that part and part?
it's that, and I think the real discussion with the ministry is to say, you know, you give us this money, now give us the flexibility to use it the right way for our community. Because I think a lot of these things, is take one size fits all, and this is not an urban area where we can run buses up and down the road. If we do, they'll be empty half the time, and I think we need to be more prescriptive in our process. And we talked about Good Smart today, and I was shocked about, I just asked the question, I said, how much of your time or miles is spent dead? No passengers, they're just taking somebody and then coming back. 50% of their mileage, not even, like, it's not even half, it's 55% of their mileage is nobody on board. So we should be able to utilize that non-use mileage to kind of schedule and say, okay, we'll pick this person up here and take them there. I know there's some problems of if you can't put a person with accessibility challenges in the same unit at the same time with a regular transit person, or you have to charge them both the same rate. So there's some issues, but I think they can be resolved. But we just have to, I think we have to put it in the right place, and the discussion today were, is get transit at the county in both Gray and Bruce to operate properly.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Be it resolved, council received staff report, KAO 2019-071 as information. I got lost when I look over there.
Okay.
And thank you. And the council consider approval of the council compensation expenses and meeting claims guidance and approval policy number 21 with changes by municipal bylaw at the June 19th, 2019 council meeting, and that council consider approval of the council committee member and staff expense claims guidance policy 37 by municipal bylaw at June 19th, 2019 meeting. Mover and seconder for that. Brian? And Martin? Anything you wanted to add to that, or highlight, Dave?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I think is kind of outstanding that's been in discussion with other members of council is the issue of the stipend for a full day committee of adjustment. I put it in here as 170, the same as the full day for a councilor. The suggestion was that it would be $10 less than double, which would be 150. Like 80 is for a half day and then 150 for a full day, but I mean, but anyway, I think people have the same value at this table, whether it's committee of adjustment, but that's a discussion.
Okay.
We can change it in the bylaw phase, or just make the change and we can go for tonight if you want.
Barb?
So Schedule A in the bylaw wasn't up to date with the 170 anyway, and I support the 150, given that the bylaw for $80 remuneration for half day, it coincides with what we're compensated as a member of council, and it shows or distinguishes that there's a difference. We're not council members when we're sitting at committee of adjustment.
Thank you.
If maybe the clerk could speak to the conferences, I mean, you were trying to separate the budget for committee of adjustment to keep it from council members, but the policy is suggesting that it be counted as one of the 3 attended conferences, which I'm okay with. I just like clarification on, does that coincide with the committee of adjustment in terms of reference?
Sure, she can speak to that and much more.
Through mayor, members of council, so when we budgeted for committee of adjustment and made that separation to 2019 budget, we accounted for the meetings and everything. In the terms of reference, it does say $80, and we've already moved it up from $60, $80 in 2018 or 2017, I believe. So the way, when we printed the bylaws, we did make that change to $150. That way it coincides with what council has $10 less, not that it's your $20 less worthy of doing it. However, it's a little bit cleaner, and it coincides with the bylaw for committee of adjustment. If we're to make a change to $170, then there's more work in changing the bylaw, updating the terms of reference, and making those additional changes. But again, it's up to council, and with regards to the conference, that we'll just, when we make the change for the 2020 appointments, because you are members of council who sit on committee of adjustment, the Planning Act requires you to have that appointment each year, and at that time, we can include the conferences in that as well.
Okay, thank you. Dave, you had?
Yeah, I just want to, the bylaw that was passed for the committee of adjustment didn't have any reference to full days, it was just a half day.
Yeah.
So let's not, like, whatever you want, you can put in here, but it sounded like there was some reference. There's no reference in here at all.
No. Sorry, if the chair's members of council, so the bylaws do per meeting, whether it's a half day or a full day. So I think the clarification that we're trying to do with this policy is that if there's a committee of adjustment half day, which I don't believe that they go over a couple of hours anyway, it's just for when we go to conferences, so it's making that clarification. So the way the bylaw is written, it's per meeting, because under the Planning Act, we do it by per meeting. We don't do it by half day or full day. So that's under, I think, section 34, whatever it is under the Planning Act that refers to committee of adjustment. However, we are gonna put that half day, full day, that way there's references to conferences.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments? Barb?
So one thing feeds another, and so the expense reporting, that template will have to change for a full day portion. Add another column.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, all in favor? That is carried. Be it resolved, the council receives staff report CAO 2019-072 as information, and the council approved the job description for the position of Human Resources Coordinator and Assistant to the CAO, and the council directs staff proceed to have the document reviewed by the Job Evaluation Committee to establish pay band for the position. Do I have a mover for this? Going once. Okay, Martin and Jason. Okay, Dave?
So, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. This is just the next step after council's approval of the report last meeting. We created the job description. It's a job description that's for a coordinator, HR, and that's the most important part of this job, and I think it fits with what our needs are. It's really focused at hiring somebody with people skills and communication skills, and train them on the HR piece, because a lot of the HR that is done is more dealing with administrative stuff, and there'll be training that there's AMCTO training we'll send them to and so on, but I think we'd like to train them within. We've seen some other situations that maybe haven't worked out, and I think this approach might be the best way, that we have a mixture of HR, IT, I think is a really important piece, and then be able to do assistance as far as report searching and just general administrative duties to assist with the administration side of my position.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Brian?
Two things, Dave. One, and you'll have to help me remember, have we budgeted for this?
So there is not budgeting for it. It was clear in the feedback we had from staff is that we need to make some changes and do a better job of that. There is some opportunity for, during transition, to have some savings in headcount, because I think there's more change that we need to do. It's obvious we need to do a better job on bylaw enforcement, so we're looking at a full-time position for building administration. And then there's some space that likely come out of maybe the loss of half a finance position, maybe for a bit of the time for this year, and then replace it with a full-time position in budget next year, because there's a lot of the HR stuff going to come out of the finance side. So this would be, what I would say would be a half a add to staff, but something that's really needed very much right now to support where we're going.
So I'll take that as a no.
No.
Okay.
Correct.
The other question I had was, where are you going to put this person physically?
So,
Are we going to make council chamber half the size, or?
there's definitely some challenges there. We're looking at likely 2 cubicles that are similar to what's at the back and what we have at the front. And the area where Patsy is would end up being 2 cubicles. And we'd likely put another pair of cubicles out in the public works area where we're building is, to accommodation there. And that, to me, that second one would be for the short term until we look at accommodation. in budget next year, because we're definitely getting tight.
Well, I guess my overriding concern is that there's a lot of moving pieces. And until you really get this mapped out, I'm wondering if we're just getting a little ahead of ourselves here. I see there's a job posting that has been placed for a person that's retiring. And now you're telling me that part of that job is going to be hived off to someone else or moved around. I haven't got a real clear picture of what all the moving pieces are, and like I said from the outset, there's no budget for this.
So, I think we've talked about this at previous meetings about the need for HR. I don't think that's any question. And a lot of those, there's some being done by the tax collector, some HR, there's some being done by treasurer, and I'm doing some of it. And I think we need to, it was clear in the survey that that's a void that we have been maybe putting up with for too long. The other piece is Patsy is retiring this fall, so we need a replacement there. And there's some criticality of being able to train her. She's working 4 days a week now, so to help that transition and the reduction in cost. And she's been on that schedule for a while. But we plan on hiring someone to replace her so that there's no gap in water billing process. So definitely there's some transition there. And I think the other thing is, as far as the bylaw enforcement building thing, that's going to be fully funded because we're way over our projections as far as what we expected for revenues. And I mean, we've got surpluses that we're going to have a hard time spending and figuring a way to spend. I'm serious, but you can't just spend it in building. I'm sure Bev has some other ideas, but unless we're going to drive some special cars, but I think we need to invest in definitely building and do a better job in supporting that. You know, like some of it, like, not to blame the department, but the transition thing, that DC thing, we're going to go back and fix that because there were some people overcharged and some people undercharged, so we're going to rebate, we're going to try to collect that money. But I would say, you know, this is likely a time when we need to invest in our staff a bit, and I don't think it's going to be an onerous amount. I'm projecting it'll be $23,000, depending on the type of person that we find. But we're looking at likely doing this transition somewhere between August and 1st of September, so we're only looking at 4 or 5 months left in the year. And I think it's an investment we need to make in providing staff with confidence that they're going to get the HR that they need. And we've got a lot of things going on right now that I think we need to do a better job of getting things done in relation to projects and so on. Anyway, I'll leave that with you unless there's any other questions.
Barb? Thank you.
Through the chair. Thank you, Dave, for responding to my questions. I do have concerns that we're moving this along. I agree with Brian that there's a lot of moving pieces. You're developing a position description that's affecting other position descriptions, people's jobs, and yes, the survey showed that there is a void. Even council agreed that there's a void in how or who, with the qualifications that we have for human resources. And you said yourself, Dave, that we need to invest in our staff, and I think investing in our staff by having someone who has some HR background, experience, education, is important. And I think we've had the discussion about whether high school and 1 year experience is sufficient. Staff want to feel confident that this person can start off, you need the support as well. I'm thinking, you mentioned training through the AMCTO, but Human Resources is the Certificate of Human Resources, I think it's a CHRA, I'm not sure. Yes, I'm pretty sure that's what it is, all these letters. How is it AMCTO would be training them on human resources, on just seeking clarification?
So there's a 2-day course on HR and legal, and I think that's a really important piece. I think we have to remember that we did not have any high-skilled people in the past in HR. This is managing I think we need to let staff make the decision of what we need to hire. We think this job description fits our needs. It is, it's not that we don't have support. We have support from Warden Up to Grove. We got the county that will support us through the HR people up there. I think we need to hire, and we've done it before. We've hired young people that we train them the way that we want to develop them. They don't come with bad habits from others. And by and large, have a greater chance of success of growing them from within. And I think a lot of the tasks that are being done now, no one really has massive HR experience other than we're putting everything into one position. And we can train those people to do the job efficiently and effectively. And I think if there's an internal candidate that can do it, I think the right internal candidate would get respect from the people they work with, where there might have to be a trust built up later. But anyway, that's our position on it. We may not find internally, and we may have to go externally, and then we can up our requirements. But I'm not sure we're looking for. I'm not sure we can pay for a seasoned HR person, because that's like looking at a $50,000 plus job or $60,000. And at this point, I think we just need someone that can deal with benefits and deal with starting packages, deal with training, deal with HR issues with regard to health and safety, work with the health and safety committee, make sure those inspections are done. And I think we have a chance that we could find somebody internally that would be interested in that type of position.
Okay, thank you. Barb?
So, I mean, it's not, it's out of our jurisdiction. Council doesn't hire the position. But it is a position that is unbudgeted. It is definitely, I support the position. I support the need for someone with an HR background, because that is what's lacking. Training someone internally when we lack the expertise, I have a concern with. And when did the county agree? We've been asking for 2-3 years if the county would provide us with some HR support. Perhaps we should take a step back, pause, and ask the county, are they looking at efficiencies? And I mean, the province is asking us to collaborate and find efficiencies. Maybe the county should be providing HR support to all of the municipalities on a fee basis. I'm not saying for free. But when did they agree that they would provide us with HR consultation?
So,
And do we have it in writing?
okay, so we don't have it in writing. The county has always said they would help us with any, on a call basis, just a phone call, have a discussion. We've done that from time to time, not often, because they have to be much more involved to give a true opinion. And so we've never leaned on them. I mean, their staff look after their staff, not ours. And I think to do a proper job of HR, it has to be a face-to-face relationship. It can't be over the phone. And any time that we get into heavy lifting, we got to go with Warden Up to Grove, because I don't think we'll ever be able to get someone on staff that can handle all HR requirements that you would need as a municipality. So, in discussing this type of thing with Ben at Warden Up to Grove, we talked about what the price range would be for different levels, and it was he agreed that, someone, more on an entry level would be what we would need and require, with the support of the county at a phone call or with the support of Warden Updegrove. So, this is the approach we've taken. Council can, direct us in another direction, but, I think we need to get started somewhere, and, I think it's more of a relationship thing and a trust thing that, we need to establish, that there's, confidentiality and all that sort of stuff, with our employees. So, I think just creating the position and developing the right kind of person, will make it work.
Barb? Yep.
So I do feel strong having come from, in a HR support role, in my, prior hat. I still think that while your formal education, external training, you've identified as high school, I think don't close your mind to someone with a post-secondary, even college, business administration with some human resources courses under their belt, and also if you're looking for someone junior, that they're working toward an HR designation, that they're actively pursuing that certificate and getting that experience. I still have concern that, and it does say assistant to the CAO, they should be providing administrative support to you, not piecemealing it out to, there's a lot of moving parts, as Brian said. I'd like to see us pause on this and have maybe the CAO and a member of council just kind of evaluate where and maybe senior manager. That's just my opinion.
Thank you.
Just, I guess the way we have to establish a job description is if we put community college, then that's what we need. You can't go outside that. So if we put high school down, I think maybe, red light, maybe I turned that. But there is a clause in here, post-secondary education at college, university related to human resource administration. I mean, that would be an asset if we can get it. So that's a goal, but you have to set the bar at what you may be able to hire and be happy with. So, again, that's what we've established. We can look at it in a different way if council wants to do that.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? We'll see what the machine says. There it is. That is carried 4, 2, and 1. Thank you. Next, be it resolved, council receives staff report CAO 2019-074 as information, and the council approved the Southgate noise bylaw dated June 19th, 2019 by municipal bylaw 2019-096. I have a mover for that. Michael and Jim. Dave, anything you want to add or highlight with that one?
Not really, other than we are now in a tennis game with the Administrative Attorney General. So they've pointed out some areas that they'd like to see changed. We've reflected those changes in here, and maybe just added a bit more meat on the bones to support levying fines. And so that's really what this is all about. And the next point will be just to get another blessing from the ministry, and hopefully pass it by law. Maybe you should defer the bylaw, because Joanne and I had a conversation that does need to go back to the ministry. So I'd suggest defer the bylaw until such time as we get that blessing from the ministry back.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments on this? Mark?
Yeah, through the chair, Dave. Oh, excuse me. section 18 with the canine and the animals, who will do the charging there? Would it be canine officer or
Correct.
pilot?
So,
Or mixture of
for
both?
18,
Yeah.
no,
No?
well, it was a dog, hold on. There is in the canine bylaw as well, noise made by a pet, so if the noise was made by a pet, for sure, it would be the canine control officer, so this kind of backs it up as well. But if it was a harbored animal, like you got some, I don't know, noisy snake, I don't know. But whatever, that would likely come under the law enforcement officer. A mammal or a bird, I mean, if a. Pictures? No, I don't know pictures. I mean, you got some bird or something that's squawking away and the window's open and it's bugging the next door neighbor, that would definitely be a bylaw enforcement, it wouldn't come under canine.
And number 31 with deliveries, I was just wondering, does that specifically apply to the on-farm shops?
Well, it would be more in a commercial, industrial setting where there's residential and close proximity, where, you know, you've got some truck coming in the middle of the night delivering stuff. If the receptor of the noise is bothered by it, like likely in a rural area, a truck kind of going to a rural shop, you're not even gonna hear
Well,
it.
the only reason
But-
I asked that is that I had a complaint about some trucks coming in at
Then we can apply this.
12:30, so you can apply
We
it.
can apply this. I mean, we've got a noise complaint right now in a rural situation, about trucks. So that's where that would apply.
Thank you.
Right.
Not to stifle the discussion, because they're good questions, but I'd like to propose an amendment that council defer this bylaw following Ministry of Attorney General approval and review.
So, just for clarification, this is just to receive the report, so would we just defer the whole report and everything? Is that what you're looking for?
Is that what I'm looking for? No, just the bylaw.
Just the bylaw, okay. So, we can do that when we get to the bylaw, right? Okay. So,
You need a seconder for the amendment.
okay. Okay, so what we need is the resolution amendment that the second line, the council approve the Southgate noise bylaw, that we would defer that. So Brian's moving that because the clerk told us what we're saying. And
She suggested.
yes, and Michael seconded that. Any discussion on that amendment? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? That is carried. So then we have the motion as amended, which would be just, yep. Pardon?
Are you going to take more questions?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I'm just saying what the motion as amended is,
Okay.
okay? Yeah, so it's that we resolve that we receive the staff report for as information and that we defer the noise bylaw. That's all it's gonna be. So, yeah, any more questions? Barb?
So, will we still have an opportunity to provide some input before it comes back to the minister? I'm just, okay, because I'm concerned, I just want to make sure that, that approvals that are currently in place for certain activities are not within this bylaw and the way it's worded. Are we affecting any shops or other activities that have been pre-approved and passed by zoning and all of that? Could it be interpreted that they are then affected without
So-
specifically naming?
So, this bylaw, as it was written before this redraft, is in force and effect by bylaw. I think it was 072, but anyway, that doesn't matter. We could not likely be successful with fines unless the fine was related to discharging of fireworks, which didn't change. the others have changed. So the ministry are just saying, hey, if you want to be more successful or likely have a high probability of success in court, the short-term wording should be changed, and so we made those changes they recommended. The reason I say no, I was pretty callous in saying no, but we can't make any more changes unless we make them tonight, put in here. The minister needs to look at it, we need to bring it back unchanged past it, to be really in a solid piece of framework that we can take and enforce through bylaw enforcement, or K-9, or whoever else.
Mayor, members of council, I think maybe you're referring to existing shops that might have, noise.
Plan control.
Right, so that would be separate from the bylaw, so if they're included in the site plan control, when it goes to that zoning bylaw amendment, that would be separate from this, and we don't impose fines for that. This would be anything outside of those hours that are already in that agreement through site plan.
This is nothing to do with zoning, fines, or site plan control bylaw or anything like that. That's a separate issue. And you control them more by, restricting uses in the future.
Or other organizations that have activities that have been granted. Number 19, no person shall cause or permit noise created from shouting, yelling, or any boisterous activity which is clearly audible on a neighboring property. Well, children play, and they swim, and they splash, and they giggle, and who decides what's, somebody complaining about their neighbor because their children are laughing? Like, I'm taking it out to an extreme, obviously, but someone could read that and complain about their neighbor talking too loudly.
Get off my lawn, Paul.
Yeah, so that was pretty well word for word was in the old bylaw, and it got missed. Somehow it got missed getting in here, so we put it in. I think it still has to be in because, some people abuse this stuff, and, I know we had a complaint personally, and, not a complaint, they said how joyful it was to hear kids playing next door, which is kind of nice, but there are people that don't like it either. And that's where you have to rely on the bylaw enforcement officer to use some common sense and just say, come on, grow up, or just, you tone it down, you grow up, and everybody live on happy ever after. But this is the easy part. He's got the hard part.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions, comments with this? And all in favor of the motion as amended? And that is carried. Thanks, Dave. Next, we'll go into Clint's reports. Be it resolved, council receives staff report PL 2019-038 for information, and the council consider approval of bylaw 2019-085. Mover for that? Jason, and seconder, Brian.
Through the members of the council, I'm not Clinton, but he says that these are pretty routine, the next couple, except the last one, are pretty routine site plans. If there's any specific questions that might arise that he suggested to defer to the next meeting, they're pretty routine and nothing surprising out of these.
Well, I'm confident we can ask the clerk any questions we want to, so.
Maybe I'll just add to that. This first one is an expansion of use of more wine to sell, or like retail shop, not so much site plan issues as it's a retail shop additions to support the rural economy, which we can use. Hydraulic hoses and stuff like that. Anyway, he wants to expand that business because it's been working well for him.
Glad to hear about a business working well. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved, council receives staff report PL 2019-040 for information, and that council consider approval of bylaw 2019-093 authorizing the entering into a site plan agreement. Do we have a mover for that? Barb, seconder, Martin? Any questions or comments on this one, or would we like to hear from the clerk again? Yeah, let's hear from the clerk.
Mayor, members of council, again, this is just a pretty routine site plan agreement.
Thank you for that enlightening comment. Any, seeing O'Brien?
Just real quickly, do you ever have any concerns enforcing these plans? Or
Within that community, or any site plan?
any site plan?
Well,
These specifically, but in general?
so within that community, they are very, very cooperative. I mean, if they think they're doing something wrong, they want to know and they'll correct it.
Okay. And I'm not suggesting I've heard any problems,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
asking.
Site plan control gives you quite a bit of, and it's in their best interest to work well with their neighbors. Some of the older ones that established years ago before Southgate, where, they weren't under site plan control, so we do have a little bit of problems, but
Okay,
by and large, they work pretty well with it.
good, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved, council receive staff report L 2019-041 for information, and the council consider approval of bylaw 2019-094 authorizing the entering into a site plan agreement. Do I have a mover for that? Jason, and seconder Michael? Does the clerk have any comments on this one? No. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Next. Be it resolved, council receives staff report PL 2019-044 for information, and the council directs staff to proceed with an amendment to the bylaw and schedule a public meeting for August. Do I have a mover for that? Martin, seconder, Jason? Let's hear from the clerk.
Through Mayor, members of council, so this was a little bit different. There was an application for a building permit and expansion for this location, I believe it's this school. However, when we were looking into files, it doesn't mean that the zoning bylaw had been changed to allow for the school on that property. So what we're requesting now is for council to approve this, so that way the CBO can issue that building permit for that expansion, and then we will have to go through the proper process for a public meeting in order to make that change and bring it back to council. But the CBO does require this approval in order to grant that expansion. The reason why it was put on the agenda is because the building process has 10 days to comply, and we need to get this on the agenda as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from council?
So Bev, do I understand that if this is approved, that you'll be able to issue the building permit, and they'll be able to start construction for this fall's school season?
If this is approved, I am going to approach the client with a proposal of a conditional building permit. They're going to have to enter into a conditional agreement. But if this was approved, they would have to return the property back to its original form.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll take that up.
Yeah.
I hope they do.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. So that settles that part of the discussion. Okay. Be it resolved, council receives staff report FIN 2019-026, retirement, accounts receivable position, and the council directs staff to proceed with the hiring process for a finance assistant revenues. Mover for that. Martin and Jim. Liam, do you have anything you'd like to highlight or add, or?
No, to point out that the person has submitted their notice of retirement on October 31st, so given the level of knowledge that is required for that position and doing water and wastewater billing, that sort of thing, We want to have sufficient training of the new person to understand our system, so that's why we're recommending a little bit of a larger overlap period.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Not seeing any. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay. Be it resolved, bylaw number 2019-085, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 19-2002, entitled the Township of Southgate Zoning Bylaw, be read a first, second, and third time. Finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. Mover, please. Brian, seconder, Michael. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-093, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan control agreement, be read first, second, and third time. Finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. Mover, please. Dayton, and seconder, Michael. Any questions or discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-094, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan control agreement, be read first, second, and third time. Finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. Okay, Jason, move that. Saw your hand move. And Brian seconded it. Could have been an inch, but that was close enough. Any questions or comments on this one? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Be it resolved, bylaw number 2019-095, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a TEL agreement for the Main Street Dundalk project, be read a first, second, third time. Finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. With a mover for that, Martin, and the seconder, Michael. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Yeah, so this is the noise bylaw, and do we need a motion to defer it?
Through the mayor, members of council, so it'll be it resolved that council defer bylaw 2019-096 until further review and approval by the Ministry of the Attorney General.
Okay, Barb and Martin. Okay, any further discussion on that? All in favor? And that is deferred. Thank you. Okay, the next one is be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-097, being a bylaw to adopt a conference training and educational policy for council staff and volunteer firefighters, known as policy number 2, be read a first, second, and third time. Finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. Mover, please, Jim. Seconder, Michael. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-098, being a bylaw.
I'm not sure, because it started down, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure how I voted because the screen disappeared halfway through and it showed up as 5 with 2 abstaining, so I'm not sure I was voting in favor of it, but I didn't get a chance to push another screen popped.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure how the vote went. There were 2 abstained.
carried?
It was carried, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I just want to clarify that I was voting yes.
okay, thank you. Be resolved that bylaw 2019-098 being a bylaw to adopt a council compensation, expenses, and meeting claims guidance policy, known as Policy 21, be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book as amended. That's one change that Jim will move that. And then seconder, Brian, any further discussion? All in favor? That is carried. And that's 7 in favor. Next, be it resolved by law 2019-099 being a bylaw to adopt a council committee member and staff expense claims guidance policy, known as Policy 37, be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that? Barbara and Jason? Any discussion on that one? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. And that was 7 in favor. Be it resolved, bylaw number 2018-101, being a bylaw for the land lease agreement between Cedar Acre Farms Limited and the Township of Southgate, be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. Over that, Martin, and the seconder, Michael. Any discussion or questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Now, 7 in favor. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-102, being a bylaw to transfer a closed part of a road allowance not required for municipal purposes to an adjoining landowner, in occupation thereof being part of Petrie Street Crescent, shown on Part 2 on Plan number 16R11173, be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. For that. Jim and Brian, any discussion on that? Barbara?
Where is this? Thank you.
Just a little sense.
It's the one that is down, yeah,
Mhm.
thank you.
North and
I was
Yeah.
pretty sure I knew where it was, but there's no map with the bylaws, so, thank you.
Okay. Any further? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Be resolved that bylaw number 2019-103, being a bylaw to authorize an extension agreement pursuant to section 378 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. Do I have a mover for that? Michael, and Brian.
Sure.
Okay, good. Thank you. Barb?
It references confidential Schedule A. Is council privy to knowing what is on confidential Schedule A at any point in time, if we're passing a bylaw that references it?
Let's let the clerk answer this.
Through mayor, members of council, so the only reason why Schedule B is here, because Schedule B is the one that is actually being requested for approval. There was no reason to have Schedule A confidential is because it has the name of the individual who is associated with this agreement, the arrears, I believe it is. I understand why Schedule B was included and was included in a closed consent item. When a document references a confidential Schedule A and it's not attached or provided for reference in closed consent item, I just wonder what we're signing. So again, Schedule A it's not part of the bylaw requesting approval. If there's any specific information, I believe it would be up to the treasurer to confirm, just because this is the schedule that we had received, and again, it was already approved by council. There were changes with it, so that's why there's no need to include it in this agenda, since it isn't material to the approval of the part of the extension agreement.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. 6-4, 1 against. Be it resolved, council approve the items on the regular business consent agenda dated June 19, 2019, save and accept items and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Are there any items anyone would like pulled? In 11.1. Seeing none, we need a mover and seconder for it as is. Brian and Jason. Okay. Any comments on any of the ones in 11.1? Barb?
Through the chair, 11.1.1, notice of adjudication. I'm wondering if the clerk could elaborate on what will, is this the end of the road? Is there yet another appeal after this? Does anything get made public in the end? I'm just wondering what the whole process is, and I understand that there's no cost to the township other than all of your time, which has been significant.
Go ahead.
Through Mayor, members of council, no, this is not near the end of the process. I think this is about the middle of it. I've been working on this file since late 2017, and I think we should have about another year to year and a half before we see this completed. Following the adjudication process, so there is a process when you have an FOI request and there's information that's redacted and you're going through the IPC. What happens is we first go through mediation. Mediation didn't suffice, wasn't sufficient to the requester. Following mediation, during that process, throughout the 10,000 pages that we had to go through, I reviewed again that information, consulted with the treasurer on some information that had been redacted. We released about 2 or 3 names that were there because going through 10,000 pages, having 3 staff look at it, there were some errors that we obviously had with 10,000 pages. So the IPC was really accommodating with that. We released that information. Following that, we had another couple of days where we discussed with the IPC some further information that we had questions with the requester at that time. So June 6th was the deadline for the final appeal. We had gone through the process where there was a fee waiver appeal, which is in the report that I had denied and the IPC had agreed with. So June 6th was the last date with regards to any appeals with regard to this file. So on June 6th, we were notified that there was only one piece of information that was being requested through the documentation, which I believe was just the 2015 GL. So for that reason and that reason alone, will we be going through adjudication. So again, that will take other significant staff time to go through it, to prepare our motions when we go through adjudication. Once I am aware of when we will go to adjudication, then I'll let council know again. At this point, I don't believe that we need any legal representation because I've got a really good handle on this case. I'm not new to this. I've spent years with regard to FOI requests and going through the adjudication mediation process. But once we go through this, what happens is after that adjudication process is over, the IPC has a report that comes out, and that report comes public, and most of that information becomes public through there.
Thank you. I think it's really good that the dollar values, public, see what this is costing the taxpayers. Any other questions or concerns about this or any of the others in 11.1? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. Okay. Be it resolved, council received the items on correspondence consent agenda dated June 19th, 2019. Save and accept items. Direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Are there anything in 11.2 pulled? For a second, I heard the ding, thought I had a thought or something. The light went on. Nope. Not seeing any pulled. Can I have a mover and seconder for it? That's Michael and Jason. Any discussion on any of 11.2? Yay. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Be it resolved, the council received the items on the closed session consent agenda June 19th, 2019, and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Mover for that. Jason and seconder. Jim, thank you. If there was any discussion, we'd have to go closed. Is there any need for that? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried. No new business. County report. Got approval for the official plan. There was only, I think, 20 minor things that had to be updated on that. The draft of the Trails Master Plan is out, and so that's something that's going pretty good now too. And the other big thing that came out today actually that I saw was at the Economic Development meeting is their branding made in Grey County. There's basically a little design that's the shape of the county, and they're wanting to put that on a lot of businesses and a lot of things that are agriculture related, or even restaurants. If they use 3 suppliers locally, they can put it on it and things like that, just to enhance the Grey County visibility in the province. So that's pretty good. And the other thing I saw today was the numbers. We are just under 100,000 population with newest numbers for the county. Was there anything else that was really significant, Brian?
Just one thing, the 2 winners of the Federation of Agriculture Public Speaking Competition were there, and they both gave their speech. Sydney Martin and Grace Rotenberg-Evans both spoke, and they both did a tremendous job. Sydney spoke about mental health in the ag community. She did a tremendous job, and it was very impactful. And Grace talked about miniature horses, which was I don't want to say a short speech, but it was very good. That's all.
Yeah, it is a privilege to have them up there and to listen to them. And Grace, the younger one, questions or comments on that? Member privilege. Barb?
Recreation weekend is this weekend. Friday, there is How to Train Your Dragon, Part 3 at the Pavilion in Memorial Park. Saturday is a fun-filled day and evening, I'm sure, with the Fireman's Frolic, 11 till 3, and then the Lioness Dinner from 5 till 7, and then the dance at the Pavilion as well that evening, and then there's the breakfast Sunday morning.
Yes, and somehow in a weak moment I volunteered for the dunk tank. So we'll see how that goes. Yes.
We're paying money for people to throw balls.
That's right.
The baseball team is lined up.
Okay, good. And I think too, we're heading towards that time of year. There'll be the car show in Holstein on July 1st, and then the fireworks. And all those festivities there, and then there's the auto swap meet on the 6th and 7th of July in Dundalk, and there's a lot going on with that. Anyone else have any other things? Bart?
The swap meet is on July 6th, and the Ag Fair is actually July 5th and 6th.
Okay,
Lots coming up.
the weather's good, be running around. I'm not seeing any more. There was no closed meeting. Be it resolved, bylaw number 2019-100, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Southgate at its regular meeting held on June 19th, 2019, be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and entered into the bylaw book. Do I have a mover and second for that? Jason and Jim? Any discussion? All in favor? That is carried. And Brian is going to move that we adjourn. So thank you, everybody. Got lots done, and have a good, whatever. Whatever you want, good, have it.